This week, join me on a treasure hunt through the Holy Land using this copper scroll as our guide. Could this mysterious list of secret caches reveal a hoard of silver and gold worth $1 billion? Is it the treasure of King Solomon or the lost fortune of an Egyptian pharaoh?
160 tons
Yeah.
of gold and silver.
Can you imagine?
To find out, I'll follow the clues of the scroll to an ancient copper mine. Explore Dead Sea caves that might still hold untold riches. And use ground-penetrating radar to look for treasure beneath an ancient fortress.
But nobody's ever died in there.
We're digging for the truth, and we're going to extremes to do it.
Danger, firing area.
That's right.
Welcome to the room of the Dead Sea Scrolls. First discovered in a cave in 1947, these are perhaps the most important artifacts in biblical archaeology. This collection of almost 800 manuscripts has shed new light on the Old Testament. Hi, I'm Josh Bernstein. I've come back to the Holy Land to explore one particular manuscript that raises far more questions than answers. It's called the Copper Scroll.
It's unlike anything else ever found in the ancient world. Archaeologists discovered it in 1952, when they were searching for more of the 2,000-year-old texts now known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. But this scroll was different. It was a one-of-a-kind discovery. The other scrolls were all written on papyrus or leather. But oddly, this manuscript was etched in pure copper, a rare and expensive material in the ancient world. No one knows when it was written or why, but there are some intriguing theories that are definitely worth a closer look. I'm beginning my quest by going to see the Copper Scroll itself. And it's not in Israel with the other scrolls, it's in Jordan. In the 1950s, the West Bank location where the Copper Scroll was found was under Jordanian authority. And now, over 50 years later, the scroll still remains under Jordanian control.
So I'm now in Amman, Jordan's capital, and the Copper Scroll is being kept here at the Jordan Archaeological Museum, and I've arranged for you and I to take a closer look. So how did it end up here?
Museum director Ida Nagawi guides me through thousands of years of history to a display case in the rear of the museum.
This is the Copper Scroll here?
Yes, this is the copper scroll. This is the real, yes. That is a replica.
If you found it like this,
Yes, we found it like that, and we cut it in pieces, 23 pieces.
23 pieces total.
23 pieces.
So why didn't the archaeologists just unroll it? Why did cut it
No,
at
it's
all?
very difficult. You know, it's an ancient time, and it is corroded. You know, it's difficult. If you pull it like this, maybe it will damage.
Sure.
Ada says we can take out one of the replicas for a closer look. This one contains the last 3 columns of the 12-column scroll. The full scroll, outstretched, was 7.5 feet wide.
That's real copper.
Ada tells me that most scholars believe it was written at the same time as the other Dead Sea Scrolls,
Yes.
which have been carbon dated to around the time of Christ. Unfortunately, because the Copper Scroll is metal, not parchment, it can't be similarly tested or dated.
Do we know what it says? Has someone translated the whole scroll?
Yeah, the scholars who translated, they said it's mentioned a detailed description of a hidden treasure in Palestine.
And what's the treasure described here?
It's about 63 hidden treasures of gold and silver, which is equal to 160 tons of gold and silver.
No way.
Can you imagine?
Wait, 63 treasures. This describes
Of gold, yes.
160 tons of gold and silver are hidden somewhere.
Somewhere in Palestine.
Has anybody found it yet?
No, not yet. All the attempts to find it was failed. It's still out there.
It's a simple but cryptic list of some 60-plus locations.
In the ruins of the Vale of Achor, beneath the steps that enter to the east, down 40 cubits, a chest of silver and its vessels.
A By some accounts, the treasure amounts to $1 billion worth of gold and silver. This is a quantity so vast that many scholars originally thought it was a kind of legendary tabulation. Still others dismissed it as a hoax. But most experts now say the Copper Scroll is a genuine document. The locations described, however, remain a mystery. One thing's for sure. It's far too tantalizing a tale to ignore. So I'm off on a quest to find out if there really is any ancient treasure buried somewhere in the middle of the Judean wilderness. I'm going to start my search where the scroll was discovered over 50 years ago. The rugged caves of Qumran on the western shores of the Dead Sea.
Welcome to Qumran. It was here in the caves of these cliffs where the Dead Sea Scrolls, and more importantly, the Copper Scroll, were discovered. But in a landscape known for its rugged terrain and rocky slopes, some caves here are harder to reach than others.
If someone wanted to hide directions to a priceless treasure, they certainly would have picked a spot equal to the task.
Allison?
Josh.
Yes, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
To follow their trail, I've enlisted the help of Dr. Allison Schofield, biblical scholar who believes that the Copper Scroll describes a real treasure.
So I'd like to take you to Cave 3, but first, let's drop in by Cave 6 here at Wadi Qumran.
All right, sounds like fun.
Cave 3 is the remote location where the Copper Scroll was found, but we're taking the scenic route to get there. It's amazing to see the incredible lengths the keepers of the scrolls went to in order to hide their precious documents. Below us is Cave 6, the 6th cave out of 11 to yield ancient scrolls here. All the caves were remote enough to keep their secrets for 2,000 years.
So now we're at the lip, which I think, and
after getting around the lip, it's a 30-foot drop to the ledge in front of the cave.
down, off the leg.
There we are.
Okay.
Bedouin shepherds found the first Dead Sea Scrolls and sold them.
Behind.
Then they began searching other caves in the area, hoping to find more artifacts to sell.
It's a pretty awesome cave.
Yeah, it's one of the big...
There's not much more to it than what you can see here. The scrolls were found near the entrance.
So after the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, how long before the Copper Scroll?
Well, the first scrolls were found in 1947, and it didn't take long for archaeologists to realize there might be more. So they began to scour the caves in the area. In 1952, they actually came upon Cave 3, which is where the Copper Scroll was found.
This is the one I've come to see, Cave 3. To get down to it from Cave 6, we won't need our climbing gear. It's just a short hike away. Interestingly, the scrolls of Cave 3 were some of the few scrolls to be found by archaeologists, not Bedouins.
All right. So this is where the Copper Scroll was found.
Right. On what used to be a ledge in the back.
How far back?
I was hoping to crawl in there, but Allison says the Park Service has closed the cave to protect breeding bats.
Okay, so it's like an ecological thing.
Right, so we
Don't
just
disturb the bats. Okay, but it's not that deep. I can see kind of where things may have been.
Yes.
So somewhere way back.
It's intriguing. Since the scroll was never recovered by its author, maybe the treasure wasn't either.
It seems like there's a double mystery here. One, it's on copper. Why? And two, the content is so unusual, unique compared to the rest of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right. The Copper Scroll is much more of an archival text. It's very boring.
But it's a treasure map. How boring can a treasure map be?
Well, it's not boring to me, but it was written. It has no once upon a time.
Okay.
It's just written as if it were a bookkeeper's ledger. It's by far the most mysterious of all the scrolls that were discovered. Right.
That's good luck.
Coming up, I create my own Copper Scroll and try to crack the secret code of the ancient treasure map. I'm on the trail of one of history's most priceless and mysterious ancient treasures. Does this Copper Scroll point the way to a treasure trove of silver and gold still buried in the Judean desert after nearly 2 millennia? It's pretty hard to believe, so I've decided to take a little time to explore one of the more scientifically sound elements of the tale, namely, the composition of the scroll itself. To do that, I'm going back to Jerusalem, to the markets of the old city. I've come to meet a metallurgist who specializes in the techniques used to make the copper scroll 2,000 years ago. Robert Feather is an author as well as an expert on ancient metallurgy. His perspective led him down an unusual path in decoding the copper scroll. Robert's agreed to let me experiment with engraving on actual sheets of copper.
This is one I've been working on.
You've done a nice job. So as a metallurgist, you've been exploring the creation of the copper scroll and trying to understand its meaning that way.
Well, learning that one of the Dead Sea Scrolls was engraved on what turned out to be ultra-pure copper, that really got my curiosity, yes. It's just, you know, couldn't understand it. My metallurgical antennae started twitching.
Robert explains that engraving on metal was common at the time, but the metal of choice was bronze, copper with tin added for hardness. In fact, by 100 AD, pure copper had been abandoned as a writing surface for over 1,000 years. But he says pure copper would have been the best choice for creating a treasure map with flexibility.
Once the text was complete, they had to roll the copper. Would that have been hard?
They would have, well, that's why it has to be very, very pure copper. You couldn't roll anything with more than 0.4, 0.5% tin. Try and roll that. It won't
That bends
break.
very easily.
Now that I know why they chose copper, it's time to try engraving it, just as they did over 2,000 years ago.
Same tools as near as we can get, iron chisels. I'll give you the transliterated version of the copper scroll so you can try and copy a letter. In the cave. That's great. That's brilliant.
Brilliant!
You could have been a scribe. Okay.
Maybe I was.
In a previous life.
You never know.
Okay, 2 horizontal lines now to complete the cuff.
The letters are hard to form perfectly.
So it's a little bit longer on the bottom.
You're right, it's
So do you think that
Making a mistake, a mark too long, a line too short, can easily change the meaning of the text.
my spacing?
Robert tells me that the scroll is full of such mistakes, posing a huge challenge for those trying to decode the ancient document. To find out more about what the copper scroll really says, I decide to talk to someone who studied the writing in detail. I've come to the King David Hotel in Jerusalem to meet Dr. Kyle McCarter, an epigrapher from Johns Hopkins University.
How are you?
Hi, good.
He's been studying the copper scroll for over 20 years.
Great.
He believes the errors in the document betray the true intent of its makers.
These are mistakes that are not the typical mistakes that scribes would make.
What kind of mistakes?
Well, he misspells words. He puts the final letter on a word where we can tell what he's writing, but he writes the wrong letter. And this is not the kind of mistake a person who can read a language makes. As if you and I were copying something, we could speak English, but we couldn't read it.
Yeah.
And we saw a Q where it was partly damaged, we thought it was an O. If you spoke English, you'd never put an O in the place of a Q because no word would make sense that way. But if you were illiterate, you might make that kind of mistake. And this is what he does. He occasionally makes mistakes by putting letters that are clearly inappropriate.
Kyle has identified over 30 such mistakes in the text. He says the scribe got accustomed to writing letters without knowing what they meant and began mixing them up. For example, here the scribe wrote the letter Nun when he should have written the letter Resh to spell the word Chafur, dig.
I think he was a coppersmith, but I think he was probably himself illiterate.
If someone had this master list that was very important, why would they turn it over to a coppersmith who wasn't literate enough to copy it perfectly?
Precisely because he was illiterate, because they didn't want him to know what he was writing. In other words, this was hidden property. It was a secret.
I guess that makes sense, because you don't want him reading this and saying, I'm not going to copy it, I'm just going to go dig up the treasure myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Kyle's theory is that someone drew up a list of the treasures and their hiding places on papyrus or leather. Then an illiterate scribe was hired to copy the document onto copper, a material that was sure to last a long time. But whose plan was this? The scroll itself is silent. but we can guess.
Who, at the time that this document was being written, would have had that much wealth?
It's very hard to think that any institution in Judea at this time would have had this much money except for the Jerusalem temple.
It would seem that all roads lead here, to the Temple Mount. It is perhaps the holiest site in the world, held sacred by Christians, Jews, and Muslims. It's a site that has witnessed some of the Holy Land's most monumental events.
This is the sacred spot where King Solomon built his opulent temple to house the Ark of the Covenant. This first temple was destroyed in the 6th century BC by Babylonian invaders, and the Ark disappeared. 500 years later, Herod the Great rebuilt the ancient temple and restored it to its former glory. Kyle believes this second temple possessed the tremendous wealth described in the Copper Scroll. It stood for 100 years until the Romans ransacked and destroyed it in 70 AD. But could some of its treasures have been hidden ahead of the Roman attack? I rejoined Dr. Allison Schofield at a spot overlooking the Dome of the Rock, the Muslim shrine built on the sacred site in the 7th century AD.
It's hard to underestimate how important the Second Temple was. Not only was it the focus of religious life, but it was also the center for politics as well, as if it were the Capitol Hill of antiquity.
Gotcha.
It was also the site of judicial activity, as if it housed the Supreme Court.
Wow.
As well, it was the center of economic life. So the Treasury Department was there as well. So it really makes sense that that's the only place that could have possessed as much wealth as we have written in the Copper Scroll.
And so, do we know where on the Temple Mount the treasure would have been?
Right, so if you see those archways over there, right about where those arches were, you would have come in the Golden Gate, straight into the Holy of Holies, and that's where the treasure would have been kept.
Okay, so let's assume that the fortune and treasure was here. Why move the treasure out at all?
Well, for that we have to understand the history. The Romans were actually in power over this area for 120 years. So in 66 AD, the Jews decided to rebel against Roman rule. So, of course, in a bold but doomed move, they rebelled, and quickly the Romans came in.
And the temple was destroyed.
Yes, so it makes sense that since they knew the Romans were coming, that they would have taken the treasure from the temple and hidden it somewhere else.
900 talents are at the bottom of the big cistern in the courtyard of the peristyle. 42 talents lie under the stairs in the salt pit. 65 bars of gold lie on the third terrace in the cave of the old washer's house.
If Allison's right, someone transported a tremendous treasure out of the city and created a list of hiding places. Allison says she can show me the path they might have taken. At the time, several sects of Jewish priests had access to the temple. But one group seems more intimately linked with the history of the Copper Scroll than any other. The Essenes were a Jewish sect who lived outside Jerusalem in Qumran. Most scholars believe they were the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Could they also have hidden the temple treasure?
Yes, we're just...
Allison takes me to a neglected spot outside the modern city walls that might help answer this question.
So the Romans were here.
Yes, you can see the columns are left here from the Romans.
Thanks to the Roman occupation, we have historical references to this very place, which they labeled the Essene Quarter.
So here, we're walking right on top of the second temple wall. And this is what I want to show you.
This is what we came for.
Yes, here, that is the Essene Gate.
Where?
It's hard to see, but these flat stones, these two stones right here, that's all that's really left of the gateway, and these two large stones, the flank stones on each side.
So when we talk about the treasure leaving the temple, this is
the gateway that it would have come through, or it's a bit tenuous?
Possibly. The gate here gives us a clue that Essenes actually lived in the old city of Jerusalem. So not just at Qumran, but they would have been living here as well. So assuming that the Essenes wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls and then, of course, the Copper Scroll, it does link the Copper Scroll to Jerusalem.
Allison has brought some maps of the city to show me the path the treasure may have taken.
So here we have the gateway of the Essenes, and that would have been approximately here, as you can see the old walls as they were.
Just outside this gate, the valley leads east, directly to the Essene settlement in Qumran. Out into the Judean desert, the Essenes would have carried their incredible treasure, while the Romans bore down on the city. Up next, I journey into the Judean desert in search of their lost treasure. And I meet an eccentric Texan who believes he's close to finding the temple loot. I'm in Israel, traveling with Dr. Allison Schofield, archaeologist and Copper Scroll expert. We're hunting for the treasures of the Copper Scroll.
Danger, firing area.
Just keep going.
All right. Nice. You know, every treasure has its challenge.
That's right. Beware.
Yeah.
We're driving through an Israeli army training ground that lies between Jerusalem and Qumran. Allison says that the items listed in the Copper Scroll were probably from the treasury of the Second Temple. With the Romans on their way to put down a Jewish rebellion, the Essene priests may have carried the temple treasure out of the city to hide it somewhere near their settlements in the Judean desert.
Fairly nondescript.
Right. It's pretty desolate.
The Essenes lived in nearby Qumran, and the valley would have looked as desolate then as it does today.
Really, we can just pull over anywhere.
Right. This is it.
Geographically, this valley is important because it lies on a major transit route between Jerusalem and Qumran. It would have been a natural stopping point for anyone traveling this way.
So where we are right here is the beginning of a very large valley. It's typical of the Judean desert. As you can see, there's not a lot out here.
Just a lot of sand and sun. And maybe a few $1 billion of treasure.
Right, if only we could find it. But where to begin is another story.
Okay, so this valley, though, is mentioned in the Copper Scroll.
Well, this is the best candidate for the Valley of Achor. So in the first line of the Copper Scroll, it mentions the Valley of Achor.
Look at that. I've got my scroll here. In the fortress, which is in the Valley of Achor, 40 cubits under the steps entering to the east, a money chest, and its contents of a weight of 17 talents. So somewhere out here, if this is the valley, which I'll go with, there's a fortress to the east with steps and a money chest. So how do you begin? Let's say this is it, right? The treasure hunt begins here. How do you begin to determine where you're going to dig?
The problem is they use very generic hiding places. Oil presses and stairs. They're not very specific.
And there's another possibility that anyone searching for the treasure has to confront. The treasure may have been recovered already. After all, whoever hid the treasure also probably planned to reclaim it, at least once things settle down. There's only one way to know what really happened. Find one of the locations listed in the scroll and start digging. Fortunately, plenty of people have done just that. And one man actually found something. I arranged to meet him the next day at his dig site where he's been working for 30 years. It's just a short distance from Cave 3, where the Copper Scroll was found. His name is Vendel Jones. He's an amateur archaeologist and theologian.
I came here on Thursday, the 8th of June, in 1967. My attention when I first got here was to find the treasures of the Copper Scroll.
I've come to meet Vendel because he's holding one card that trumps all others. He's the only person alive who has found something by following the clues contained in the Copper Scroll. Those clues led him to this cave. He began excavating in 1972. For Vendel, the Copper Scroll treasures aren't just artifacts for museums. They're sacred treasures with deep significance for Christians and Jews today. He's on a mission to find them.
As we're going up, this is the Cave of the Column. It has two entrances described in the Copper Scroll.
Okay.
This is the opening, but the chamber goes all the way back another 75 meters.
In 1988, after 20 years of searching, Vendel's work began to pay off. His team uncovered an object that Vendel believes is described in the Copper Scroll.
We found a bottle of holy anointing oil from the time of Moses.
According to Vendel, the holy relic he found and all the items in the Copper Scroll are not treasures from the Temple of Herod, which was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. Rather, he believes they're treasures from 500 years earlier, from the Temple of Solomon, which housed the Ten Commandments, the Ark of the Covenant, and the Tabernacle. His theory hinges on these 6 letters, which he translates as tabernacle.
I think it's the tabernacle.
Why?
The tabernacle, because that's what it says, Khan, Mishkan. Here is a tabernacle. Rabota Shishi on the 3rd level. And all the golden fixtures.
So when you're looking for the treasure of the Copper Scroll, you're looking for the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes. It's one of the things I'm looking for.
So this is the greatest treasure map ever written.
For sure. For sure. Can you imagine the impact it's going to have on the world
Yeah.
when we find the tabernacle?
And as far as you, it's not a question of if.
No, it's when.
Vendel is nearly alone in his belief. Most archaeologists who've studied the jug believe it's typical of the Second Temple era. But the oil found in the jug was of the same type used to anoint kings and priests in both temple ceremonies. Vendel has more work to do to prove his theory that the jug is from the First Temple.
This is where we're going to be excavating next time, opening that under the slope.
So you think that all the contents of the First Temple, the treasure,
Everything.
all the gold,
Right here. There is a silver chest containing the garments of the high priest, Aaron.
this is also from the Copper Scroll
Yes.
translation?
Yes.
Your translation is totally different from my translation.
I know, because they don't know what they're talking about.
Okay.
I know what I'm talking about, and we have found these things that vindicate the description of the Copper Scroll.
It just goes to show how difficult it is to interpret the archaic writing of the scroll. Until more of the treasures are found, the question of whose treasure it was may remain a mystery. Up next, I investigate a very different theory of the Copper Scroll. Call it the Egyptian connection. This ancient scroll is one of history's most mystifying relics. An arcane treasure map inscribed on copper. It's unlike any other object I've come across in my travels. But as I attempt to decode the text, I'm running into more questions than answers. Some think the scroll describes the treasure of the First Temple built by King Solomon. Others believe the scroll records the riches of the Second Temple built by Herod the Great. And I have one more theory to check out. I'm traveling 200 miles south of Jerusalem to the ancient Timna mines to meet up again with Robert Feather. By tracing the source of the copper, Robert developed a startling theory about the origins of the scroll. Timna is one of the oldest mines in the world.
Yeah.
Copper mining got its start here more than 6,000 years ago. Miners followed outcrops of copper into the rock, carving out tunnels like this one.
A bit of a crawl. Getting quite
Robert explains that smelted copper is never 100% pure.
right.
Scientists can analyze the relative concentrations of impurities to pinpoint where the copper came from. Here's a small vein of copper in the rock. A little water makes the green stand out.
Oh.
Is this the copper that we see in the copper scroll?
So it's a good possibility. The chemical analysis of the ore, once it's smelted from here, very low in tin, a bit of arsenic, bit of phosphorus, tiny bit of iron, and it matches fairly closely the analysis of the copper scroll itself.
But the more Robert studied the copper scroll, the more something bothered him.
The intense activity.
In the 1st century AD, the time when most archaeologists believed the scroll was engraved, pure copper had been out of daily use for about 1,000 years. On top of that, in 1000 BC, when it was in daily use, the people mining at Timna were Egyptians. Robert takes me to a 3,000-year-old sanctuary at the mine that's dedicated to the Egyptian goddess Hathor. It's here that he tells me more about how he believes the Egyptians figure into this mystery.
If you start looking at the text of the copper scroll, then it becomes, to me, there are numerous blazing indicators that they are talking about an Egyptian connection.
So are you saying then that this is not an ancient Israelite treasure that's buried, but it's an Egyptian treasure?
Exactly. And look here, the numbering system, which is a dead giveaway. Most of the numbers are not Hebrew, they're written in Egyptian numbers.
This is Egyptian?
That is Egyptian.
How do you read that?
2020 and 2 downward strokes for 1, 42. Related.
I'd noticed these symbols before, but didn't know they were Egyptian. I'm curious to hear how Robert explains that one.
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Scattered throughout the text are 14 Greek letters. No one knows what they are exactly.
You know what? It's funny, because when I was copying it, I wrote them down. I thought they were mistakes.
No, they're Greek letters that were in the original document. If you take the first 10 Greek letters and put them together, it reads the name Khenate. And I take that to mean the name of an Egyptian pharaoh by the name of Akhenaten.
Wait, Akhenaten, Nefertiti, 18th dynasty, heretic king, monotheism.
Yes. What's that doing in a Hebrew document?
Good question. I'm familiar with Akhenaten. In 2004, I visited the tomb of one of his priests. His queen was the famous Nefertiti, with the distinctive crown. Akhenaten and Nefertiti built a new opulent capital called Akhetaten, now called Amarna. They started a new religion there. They did away with all the Egyptian deities except one, Aten, the sun god. It was one of the world's first monotheistic religions, but it was not to last. After Akhenaten and Nefertiti died, the old polytheistic religion of Egypt regained power. Akhenaten was branded a heretic. The record of his reign was erased from Egyptian monuments, and his temples were destroyed.
What I don't understand, Robert, is why the Essenes, who are, let's say we place them in the 1st century BC, or shortly thereafter, have a document that relates to a pharaoh that's been dead for over 1,200 years.
Briefly, I believe the Hebrews are present at Amarna, at Akhetaten, Akhenaten's capital city. That Joseph is his vizier, his second in command.
Because they shared the same monotheistic values as Akhenaten and the Amarna Revolution.
Monotheism, exactly. And that is the clue, the key to it, because I think the Israelites, the Hebrews, are party to the knowledge of where the treasures of Akhetaten are hidden.
Robert's theory pushes the date of the copper scroll treasures back another 1,000 years, to the time of Akhenaten. He believes that Akhenaten hid his greatest treasures and entrusted their location to the Hebrew priests. They held on to the information for 1,000 years before making a more durable copy onto copper, using ancient Egyptian techniques. According to Robert, anyone looking for the treasures of the copper scroll in Israel is almost 400 miles too far north. He believes the hiding places are all in Amarna.
Right, so the connection between...
Robert's theory about the copper scroll's Egyptian connection is a radical departure from mainstream scientific opinion. But perhaps like the other theories of the copper scroll, his just needs more time. Back in the Judean desert, some archaeologists may be closer to finding hidden treasures. One of them is Dr. Orrin Gutfeld. He's excavating the ruins of a fortress that he believes is referred to several times in the Copper Scroll.
Hi, Orrin. How are you?
Hello.
Hi, Josh. Nice to meet you.
Welcome. Let's climb to the
We're
mountain.
in the valley of Hyrcania, just a few miles from the Judean Valley site Dr. Allison Schofield and I explored. As we hike up to the fortress, I ask Orrin if the Copper Scroll treasure led him to want to excavate here.
But were you an active treasure seeker looking for?
No, I was visiting the
treasure?
site for a few times.
Hoping to find something?
Look, we're not the treasure hunters.
Yeah.
We're archaeologists.
Okay, well, but if you happen to find some gold.
Sure. Welcome to Hyrcania.
Hyrcania. The view from the top is spectacular.
This is the fortress.
There's disagreement about whether the scroll speaks of a fortress or if the word simply means ruins. But either way, this place fits. If, as Orrin believes, the scroll describes treasure from the Second Temple. Why? Because we have written records of the fortress being used in the 1st century BC, plus clear evidence that it was abandoned by 70 AD, the time when most scholars believe the scroll was written.
Look at the mosaic floor, more than 2,000 years old.
The scroll describes at least 3 hiding places in or around a fortress or ruin situated above a valley called Ahor.
And we want to do the restoration.
No valley is called Ahor today, but most scholars agree it was most likely what's now known as the Valley of Hyrcania.
What we see over here is the Vale of Ahor, the Valley of Hyrcania that identified as the Vale of Ahor mentioned in the Copper Scroll. This is the only ruins above the Vale of Ahor.
So you're saying that when it says, in the fortress, or in the ruins of the fortress, which is in the Vale of Ahor, that's here?
That's here.
40 cubits under the steps entering to the east.
Exactly. So if
Are there
this,
steps here?
Yes, we have 2 staircases.
Really?
One
Yeah.
exactly beneath the top of the mountain. We found tunnel, chiseled in the rock, hewn in the rock, with stairs going down exactly under the top of the mountain. It's quite amazing.
Can I see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
I've been looking for this place.
Now we're getting somewhere. When we come back, I use ground-penetrating radar to search for the treasure that could be worth $1 billion. The trail of clues from the Copper Scroll has led me to the 2,000-year-old ruins of Hyrcania, about 10 miles east of Jerusalem. The painstaking work of excavation is just beginning here. But some archaeologists believe this fortress could be one of the locations where a massive treasure was concealed. It could still be here, buried and waiting. Archaeologist Orrin Gutfeld is taking me to an area that he spent 6 seasons investigating. He believes it's an ancient stairwell that matches the one described in the Copper Scroll. Deep inside the mountain, he's using some high-tech gear to prove it.
This is the entrance to the tunnel.
Archaeologists first found the stairway that's inside this tunnel 40 years ago. It was filled with sand. They excavated the first 50 feet and then abandoned the project. It stayed that way until Orrin arrived in 2000.
Facing to the north.
Why is the cement here? For protection?
Prevent the floods to come inside.
So it actually could fill the hole?
This is the danger, yes. Why don't we go inside and look inside?
For you, sir?
Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Orrin's team removed more than 9,000 bags of sand to clear the stairs leading down into the mountain.
That goes way down there. Oh my God, you weren't kidding.
Should be aware of that it's quite dangerous inside. Lack of air, very dark, very slippery, so you should be careful.
Okay, but nobody's ever died in there, have they?
Why not?
Someone has?
I believe that in ancient times.
Okay, but not in the last,
no, not in the last
week.
time, no.
Okay.
So let's go inside.
Okay. This is so easy, huh? Okay. You think with all the times you have to do this, you're fine?
There's the steps and the cement you can use.
In the front wall?
In the front.
Okay, now.
Used to be.
Oh, well, there's steps, but they're way down there. No, you really, there's a big drop there. Oh, I found a step. Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay?
Yeah. And now I'm going to watch you do that.
Okay.
Oh, sure, make it look easy.
He wasn't kidding about lack of air, but a leaf blower and some aluminum duct take care of the problem. Loud, but vital.
So the staircase itself was here?
Yes,
Like,
it was hewn 2,000 years ago, yes.
so when you were going down this for the first time, did you think maybe there's a treasure down
It was
there?
so exciting and so...
Yeah.
It's really amazing. More than 2,000 years tunnel.
Oren tells me that the pottery sherds found in the tunnel dated to the 1st century BC. He explains that they left most of the stairs covered with dirt to protect them as they drag up bags of sand and silt from their excavation. They've uncovered a 350-foot-long tunnel with a fork near the end. It slopes down 56 degrees directly under the fortress, then ends mysteriously at solid rock. We're going to follow the staircase down to the place Oren is now working on, just before the fork. What I want to know is, did someone at some point hide a treasure down here? Oren wants to know too, and that's where this device comes in. He's using ground-penetrating radar to probe the rock walls with sound waves. A hidden chamber could reveal both the purpose of the staircase and a lost treasure. Amit Ronen and Odelia Avivi are GPR experts.
And you're recording any sort of, I guess, air pocket.
Exactly, looking for voids. And there's a big difference between air and rock. So you immediately can see that.
And have you found anything in the ceiling?
In an earlier test that done by Amit, he found an anomaly a few meters above the ceiling of the tunnel. Now, we didn't find the connection.
So far, they haven't found any evidence of a chamber below the stairs, but they did discover 2 chambers above the ceiling. The largest measures about 200 square feet. Based on the type of geology of this area, these chambers are unusual. This may indicate that they're man-made. Now they're trying to find a passage that connects it to this tunnel.
Oren, why do you think there's a connection between this tunnel and the Copper Scroll?
In the last sentence of the Copper Scroll, it's written that in the tunnel, facing to the north, under the steps, you'll find a copy of this silver, of the Copper Scroll, in silver.
The Silver Scroll may be the greatest treasure of all. According to the description in the Copper Scroll, the Silver Scroll lists the locations of all the other treasures in even greater detail. If found, it would outshine even the Copper Scroll itself. It would prove beyond a doubt that the riches it describes are real, and it would be the key to uncovering a wealth of holy treasure beyond reckoning. By Oren's reading, the Silver Scroll was hidden beneath this fortress, under a staircase facing north. This staircase faces north. Oren is now searching every inch, above and below the stairs, for any chambers that may still be hidden.
So there could be a very specific treasure at the bottom, the Silver Scroll.
The Silver Scroll, yeah.
There's still a lot of work to be done at the fortress of Hyrcania. There are many mysteries that ground-penetrating radar may be able to bring into the light. Why was this stairway carved out of the solid rock? To what did it lead? No one knows. But if Oren does find what the stairs are leading to, he may also find a treasure of immeasurable value. Of course, the treasure might be gone. It may have been recovered by the same people who concealed it, or have been found by someone who simply stumbled upon it at some point in the past 2,000 years. But whether the treasure is from the Temple of Solomon, or from the Palace of Akhenaten, or from the Temple of Herod, as most archaeologists believe, one thing is certain. The allure of the Copper Scroll continues to inspire the curious, and the search for its riches goes on.